What's good, my people? Peace and blessings, peace and blessings. This interview actually is an interview that I filmed in June of 2021. Just a little candid conversation with me and my Aunt Ruth Lilienthal White. And this conversation is a very special conversation. This is generally how our conversations go, anyways, whenever I go down to Charleston to go spend some quality time with my Aunt Ruth. So I hope you guys will enjoy this conversation. She talks a lot about different things that happened throughout her life, how life was in Charleston, different aspects of her family connection and how we are connected. But y'all, this woman means so much to me. This is one of my closest relatives, my aunt Ruth Lilienthal White. So I hope, like I said, I hope you enjoy this interview. I hope you enjoy this conversation. Like, comment, share, subscribe, do all that stuff. Peace.
And remember, I went to school when I was four at Immaculate Conception,
Immaculate Conception, downtown Charleston.
downtown Charleston.
Okay.
Um, Immaculate Conception at that time went from primer to kindergarten and then first to 12th grade.
Okay. Okay.
So that's where I completed my education.
Okay.
My grandmother and I lived together because my mother died
Hmm.
when I was born.
Okay. Hmm.
And
And you were named after your mother.
yeah,
Hmm.
my name is Ruth.
Uh-huh.
And we lived on Duncan Street when
Okay.
I was small.
Hmm.
And then we moved from Duncan Street to Cumming Street.
Hmm.
Uh, and I lived next door to the YWCA.
Okay. Okay.
And I used to play in there.
Okay. Okay.
I would go in there and play in the hall.
Hmm.
So I met some of the nurses at
Hmm.
the time. They were nursing students.
Hmm.
And in order to go to nursing school here, they were from like upstate South Carolina.
Hmm.
Their place to live was the Y.
Okay. Okay.
So Danny's mother was a student nurse
My
in
Uncle
the
Danny.
yeah,
Okay. Okay.
Orly
Orally. Uh-huh.
when I was a child.
Wow.
And she used to take me all about and her husband, Julius,
Hmm. Hmm.
when I was a little girl.
Really?
Yeah.
I didn't know that you had a
Uh-huh.
connection with Uncle Danny too.
Yeah.
Okay. Cool, cool stuff. All right. So now tell me a little bit about, who your parents are and stuff about your bloodline.
My grandfather was Jacob Wilson.
Okay.
My grandmother was Sarah Wilson.
Mm-hmm.
But I can't go any further than that.
Okay.
I can tell you my grandmama told me, Sarah Wilson, that she was 13 years old in Emmanuel Church. Emmanuel Church was a board church,
Mm-hmm.
and they had the earthquake in Charleston.
That was in 1886.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
My grandfather purchased land in 1889 in Strawberry, South Carolina, which is still in our family.
Wow.
I pay taxes. It's right down the road there.
Right. Didn't know about that land. Now, your grandmother, when she was at Emmanuel Church and the earthquake happened, what happened? Because it wasn't the edifice that's there now.
No,
It was obviously a different building.
really, she said that she was sitting there with her grandmother,
Mhm.
which she never gave me her grandmother's name.
Mhm.
And she said she started to run. And her grandmother said, no, don't run, Sarah, because you're in the safest place you can be.
Mhm.
But she said the preacher and all of the other parishioners ran,
Mhm.
and they fell because the ground had opened up and gas lines were burning,
Mhm.
and the majority of them died.
Wow.
So I think, if I'm not mistaken, because probably
Yeah.
came
hmm
after that.
1891 was when that was built, but the
Right.
earthquake was 86.
Six.
hmm
Right.
Wow. Wow, that's crazy. So your great grandmother told her that she was in the house of
Right.
God, a safe place,
Right.
and don't move, and that's how they were one of the survivors.
Right.
That church has a lot of history there.
Yeah.
They have a lot of history. So you said you grew up on Duncan Street and then also on Cumming Street.
Right.
And
President, not
and
President, Norman.
Norman, okay. But you were raised by your mother's
Mother.
mother. Okay. But your brothers were with your dad?
Right.
Okay. Now did he go to New York at some point or was
Yeah.
okay.
My father was the captain of the fire department in Charleston
Wow.
on Cumming Street.
Okay.
The first black fire department. It started out on John Street.
Mm-hmm.
When he was on John Street, he was just a fireman.
Okay.
He became the captain when he came on Cumming Street.
And his name is George Lilienthal. Okay. So George Lilienthal, and he was the captain of the fire department. Okay. And now tell me about.
He stayed in the fire department for 30 years and retired.
Wow.
Then he went to New York.
Okay. Okay. Now tell me about who are your siblings? Because I know you're the youngest of 10?
12.
Oh, my granny. Okay. I was telling y'all. Okay. Now who is everybody from start to finish? Because I know some of your brothers' names and I know two of your sisters' names. But who's everybody from start to finish?
Originally, it was George Lilienthal Jr.
Mm-hmm.
He died when he was 29.
29.
He's buried in Promised Land Cemetery up here in Strawberry.
Okay. Okay.
Okay.
Now you and George have about a 20-year age gap.
Well, yeah.
And I remember you telling me that he was sick in
Right.
his later days.
He had diabetes.
Okay.
But he died at 29.
29, yeah.
You know. And I was like 9 years
Mm-hmm,
old.
mm-hmm.
The next sibling was Orbell.
Orbell, okay.
And she was Orbell Lilienthal Mood Chapman.
Okay.
And she died in 1971
Okay.
in California.
Was she in a car accident?
No. My sister Sarah.
Sarah was a car accident.
The third child.
Mm-hmm.
She was either 29, 30, 31, something like
Mm-hmm.
that. She died in a car accident in Jetburg, South Carolina, coming from a wedding.
Wow.
And there were children in between that made up for the 12.
Okay.
Was a set of twins that died at birth, but I don't know their names.
Mm-hmm.
And then there was like two other miscarriages that were like, I don't know if they were after George and Sarah and Orbell or where they fell in. Then after Sarah was my brother Theodore Lilienthal, and he lived here with us until he was 15 or 16. Right after my mother died, my uncle took him to New York, and he was raised there.
Okay.
Then it was my brother Robert, and he was raised here in Charleston. And my before Robert was Donald.
Donald.
He's deceased. He's buried in the military cemetery up there in New York. Actually, all of them are deceased.
Right.
I'm the only one living. After Donald and Robert, then it was Charles.
Charles, okay. I remember Charles.
Yeah. And Charles was 3 years older than me. And then it was me.
Okay.
I was the baby.
Okay, so he's the baby brother, you're the baby sister.
Right.
Okay, but you got to meet all of them. And get to
Oh,
know
yeah,
all
I
of them.
knew all of them. Yeah.
And then, okay, now Don was the brother that went.
Donald.
Donald was the brother that went into
It's
the military.
military,
All
right?
your brothers went to the military.
Only two,
Oh,
George and Donald.
and Donald. Oh,
Uh,
okay. Okay.
Teddy was what you would call an entrepreneur.
Okay.
He had a radiator shop
Mm-hmm.
and a car dealership in
Okay.
New York. Robert basically worked with him
Oh, okay.
on the radiator stuff.
Mm-hmm.
Charles, when he had a psychological problem, a
Mm-hmm.
mental problem. So when he did work, he finished new careers. These were programs that came out in the 60s after the civil rights.
Mm-hmm.
And Frank went to a school for social work,
Okay.
and so did Charles.
Okay.
But he worked with mental health.
Mm-hmm.
Frank worked with substance abuse.
Mm-hmm.
See, but that's what Charles did when he could work.
Okay.
Basically, he was disabled because of his mental condition. And me, I finished high school, I got married, and after I had my first child, Sean, I went to nursing school.
Mm-hmm.
I did a year at local hospital. I graduated, and then I went to work to Roper for 5 years. Then I went to medical university, and after going to medical university, they offered a pharmacology class, which would give me a license to give medicine.
Okay.
So I went back to school
Mm-hmm.
and got a license to give medicine. So that made me, rather than a licensed practical nurse, a licensed practical nurse number two.
Okay.
So I could work as charge
Mm-hmm.
like an RA.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. And I worked at medical university for another 13 years. And then I had a couple of nervous breakdowns. And then I left and I went to Driftwood Nursing Home, where I worked for 8 years, where I retired.
Okay. Okay. Awesome. Now tell me
But
this.
I had the time,
Mm-hmm.
but I didn't have the age.
Oh, okay. You were kind of young
Yeah,
when you retired.
right.
Okay.
Because if I was working in nursing now, it would
Mm-hmm.
be over 50 years.
Right. Gotcha. Now you said you're raised by your grandmother. Where did you didn't go to Mother Emanuel growing up? Where did you guys
No,
worship?
well, my grandmother left Emmanuel and she went to Reform Central Reform Methodist Union Episcopal Church on President Street, which
Mm-hmm.
is still there.
Okay. Mm-hmm.
Um, I was baptized there.
Okay.
I grew up in that church.
Okay.
I was there until I was 17 years old. I was an usher. I was on the junior choir. I was a Sunday school teacher. And I was secretary for my class.
Mm-hmm.
It was class number 10. And the leader was Brother Grumble.
Okay.
And when I got married, I left Central and went to St. Stephen's Episcopal Church. And I took the, what do Catholics call it? When you,
When you become a member, I mean
yeah.
they call it RCIA now, but I don't know
Um,
what it is. What it was then.
you had to take courses.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And I took the courses through Father Henry L. Grant.
Okay.
And then became a member of St. Stephen's, and I've been there since.
Since then. Okay.
Right.
Now when you and Uncle Frank, so just to enlighten everybody, Uncle Frank is my grandfather's stepson.
Right.
So when you and Uncle Frank got married, y'all the actual ceremony took place at St.
St.
Mark's
Mark's,
on Thomas Street
right?
downtown. Okay.
Because he was at St. Mark's at that time as an alkalite with Father Johnson.
Okay. Okay.
Mhm. And Father Johnson is who married us.
Okay.
Uh,
Okay. And you guys had an evening ceremony, which is you, Uncle
you,
Frank,
right,
the priest.
and two, his mother and two witnesses, and the
Wow.
priest's wife.
Wow.
And in
Yeah.
the big church was communion.
Oh.
I'll
So,
never forget I had
wow.
on a pink dress,
Uh-huh.
and Father Johnson's wife loaned me a scarf
Mm-hmm.
because at that time you had to wear a hat in
Mm-hmm.
church,
Mm-hmm.
or
Mm-hmm.
something to cover your
Cover your
head.
head.
So I
Uh-huh.
had a black scarf.
Wow.
And Frank's mama made the statement, if I had known he was going to do this, I would have planned, you could have had a banquet. And I said, no, I said, that's all right. I
Mm-hmm.
said, I've been through enough. So I'll just settle for this
Mm-hmm.
wedding right here.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Because we were supposed to get married in the parish house.
Okay.
But then when we got there and he saw me, he said, oh no, you're not going to marry her in the parish house. You're going to marry her in church.
Wow.
So that's how we got married in church.
Wow. Okay. Okay. And then immediately went over and you continued to worship at St. Stephen's.
Right.
Okay. Remember those days when I would sneak out of Macedonia? I would sneak out of church because Macedonia's the next street
Food
over.
over,
And
right?
come visit Aunt Ruth because y'all serves be quick and then y'all
Yes,
had tea time
right.
afterwards. So
And your daddy used to be so
oh
mad.
my god, every mommy and daddy. Because it was one Sunday. I want to say I came over. I must have stayed too long. Sometimes I would just drop in just to see you and then go back. And I stayed for the full service, went up and boldly took communion, and then went over with you and sat down and had some finger sandwiches and cheese and crackers. And then Reverend Austin was, of course, a pastor of Macedonia then, and that's when they made the announcement Myron Walker is missing. The minute the church, they stopped the minute the church went to restaurants and Mother Emmanuel and St. John and all these different churches. And my mom said, I know where he's at. And I remember seeing the blue mini because the doors of the church was open when I was going to take communion. And I remember seeing the blue minivan slowly drive by. I'm like, I wonder if that's mommy looking for me because I've been gone for a while. But yeah, I had to go over there and visit. But St. Stephen's like another home to me.
Right.
Yeah. So that is awesome. So now, tell me, how did you meet Uncle Frank?
High school.
Okay.
He was a club member. They had a club called the Gems.
Okay.
And he was a member of that club. And back then it was segregation,
Mm-hmm.
but we had our own little dance places to go. A man called Mr. Brooks that
Mm-hmm.
owned Brooks Motel
Mm-hmm.
and restaurant
Mm-hmm.
and pool hall.
Okay.
He would let us rent this hall that was attached to his restaurant
Okay.
for teenage parties
Mm-hmm.
on the weekend.
Mm-hmm.
So the Gems rented the hall, and I was walking home from school one day. He was in the 11th grade then,
Mm-hmm.
and I was like in the ninth or 10th grade.
Mm-hmm.
And he invited me and one of my classmates to the party.
Okay.
But she didn't go. I went,
Mm-hmm.
and that's how I met him.
Okay.
But he was a student at Burke,
And he was at Burke. Okay.
and I was at IC.
Mm-hmm.
But we all intermingled because it was segregation.
Mm-hmm.
Our parents, during that period of time, sheltered us
Mm-hmm.
because they didn't want us to be called out of our names
Mm-hmm.
by those white people. You understand? So they provided, the Charleston provided black doctors, black dentists, black pediatricians, a black hospital, which was called McLean Banks.
Okay.
My pediatrician was Dr. Barish.
Mm-hmm.
He was black.
Mm-hmm.
My dentist was Dr. Oh Lord, can't remember the man now. But he used to whistle. I can't remember. Dr. Haynes.
Okay.
Um, we never went to Roper
Mm-hmm.
or County Hospital.
Mm-hmm.
You understand? We went to, if we had to go to a hospital or something, we went to McLean back. I had white doctors back then too,
Mm-hmm.
but you had to go in they had two separate offices.
Wow.
They had an office for the black people and an office for the white people.
Mm-hmm.
We went through the back door office, and the white people went through the front door. In the hospitals, they had one wing for black people and one wing for white
Mm-hmm. Wow.
people. Hmm.
You lived through that. You
Yes,
got to see that.
yes,
Wow.
I lived through that. But like I say, we were sheltered.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas for me to say that a white person came up and called me a nigger,
Mm-hmm.
never.
Mm-hmm.
To say the only time I encountered two things that suggested prejudice, other than riding on the back of the bus,
Mm-hmm.
was when the civil rights movement was going on and they were having the meetings at um, Emmanuel.
Mm-hmm.
Me and Frank sneaked and went to the meeting upstairs
Mm-hmm.
in
In the
the
main sanctuary.
main sanctuary. And when we were coming back by the Post and Courier on Columbus Street from Emmanuel, they, some white boys was in the car and they threw Pepsi Cola bottles at us. But we weren't Martin Luther King students. We picked up a brick and threw it back at them, and they kept going.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
The second encounter is I was married to Frank,
Mm-hmm.
and Frank was working at the King Charles Inn downtown on King Street. And he called me and told me to come down there and meet him because we were going to the movies.
Mm-hmm.
So I went down there, and at that time, you had to go to the back door
Mm-hmm.
to get him.
Mm-hmm.
You couldn't go through the front door of the King Street Hotel.
Wow.
So I went to the back door where the kitchen and everybody was, and to meet him. And it was in the back door was in the parking garage.
Mm-hmm.
And these two white boys, well, I'll say they were like in their 20s.
Mm-hmm.
They saw me talking to Frank, and they said to Frank, "What are you doing with that white girl?" And they started to come at Frank. And I said, "Wait a minute." I said, "This is my husband." So one of the white guys said, "Oh, they come like that color like that down here."
Wow.
Mhm. And I never forgot it. I never forgot it.
That is crazy.
But that's the only time I encountered
Mm-hmm.
that kind of thing. And then it was a problem with my birth certificate
Mm-hmm.
when I went to nursing school. I went to get the birth certificate from the birth certificate place, right?
Mm-hmm.
At that time, it was, I can't remember the name, but it was over there on Calhoun Street. It's the birth death records
Mm-hmm.
place. And they couldn't find me. They could not find no Ruth
Mm-hmm.
Geneva Lilienthal.
Mm-hmm.
So I called my daddy in New York and told him that I couldn't find my birth certificate, and I couldn't go to nursing school without it.
Mhm.
So he sent my birth certificate from New York, and I took it there. And when she came back, she told me, "You're listed as white, and we cannot change it." I said, "Well, I'm not white."
Mhm.
I said, "What are you going to do?" So she said, "All we can put is amended, but we cannot change that." And so my birth certificate to this day says amended.
Really?
Yes. And I assumed that they listed me as white
Mhm.
because of my last name.
Being a German name.
Name.
Wow. Lilienthal.
Right.
Wow.
Mhm.
That's mind blowing. But you don't know much about your father's
People
lineage.
know. I know he had one aunt
Mhm.
named Sadie Stender,
Mhm.
and she was black.
Mhm.
Was supposedly his mother's sister.
Mhm.
She worked for Elsa's Dress Shop
Mhm.
on King Street as a seamstress,
Mhm.
and she lived until I think the 90s. I'm
Mhm.
not sure.
Mhm.
Her husband was James Stender.
Mhm.
She had two children, Corrine, and Corrine married a Hazel, and James Stender Jr., which Corrine is dead now, but James is still living.
Mhm.
But because of James' color, he was so light
Mhm.
and what have you. He could straddle,
Mhm. Mhm.
and he did that.
Mhm.
So, I know he married a white woman.
Mhm.
So I have lost contact with him. I
Mhm.
knew him when we were in school
Yeah.
together because he went to ICS too.
Okay.
That's all I know about my father. I don't know who his mother is. I researched him
Mhm.
on the thing, and somewhere down the line, it was a Fred Lilienthal
Mhm.
that must have been his father
Okay.
or grandfather
Mhm.
because it was listed along with his birth record.
Mhm.
But his mother, I can't remember the name, but it was just a name, and it was Baby Boy Lilienthal.
Mhm.
You understand?
Mhm.
That's all I know about those people.
Wow.
But I do know that we are the only black Lilienthals in America.
Right. Yeah, I didn't know about that too. Wow. Wow. Now there was a time your dad, he died before I was born, but he was in the hospital, and your brother Teddy came to visit him. I want
Right
to say there was a man that was there,
there, and he was white.
and
Your dad, my dad said that was his brother.
but he didn't. So the man left the room,
Hmm.
and then some time went on, and your brother asked,
Right,
"Who was this
his
man?"
dad,
And he
his,
just casually said,
his
"Oh, that was my brother."
brother. He told me
Mhm.
that his brother was living in Florida, but he never speculated what his brother's name was. None of that.
Wow.
So
You know, a lot of folks in that generation didn't speak much about.
no, they didn't
Mm-hmm.
because they were basically ashamed
Mm-hmm.
because he told Boodle, the guy that he raised, we claim him as a brother, but he's not. He was a child that was on the street, and my sister asked him if he was hungry, and he said, yeah. And she took him home, and my mom took him in and raised him. So he considered himself a Lillian dog, too. His name was Jenkins. But anyway, he told Boodle,
Mm-hmm.
Boodle was teasing him.
Mm-hmm.
Boodle said, Cap, because that's what we called
Mm-hmm.
Daddy. Said, Cap, you born in the outhouse, in the back house. And Daddy said, well, hell no, boy, I live in the front house. on LaGree Street.
LaGree Street. Oh, I was thinking it was Line Street. It's LaGree Street. Okay.
Yeah. But he
Okay.
was born on Line
He was
Street.
born. Okay. Okay.
Born on
Yeah.
Line
Born on Line Street.
Street.
Wow. They grew up on LaGree.
He-
Wow. Okay. Yeah, because I mean, I grew up. There's a few
And
blocks from
he
Line.
said, when I asked him what school he went to,
Mm-hmm.
because to be a captain when at his age and that time period, you have to be able to read and write.
Mm-hmm.
And so I said, Daddy, what school you went to? And he said he went to Bishop England. So in order for him to have gone to Bishop England, he must have been listed as white.
Yeah. Because Bishop England didn't integrate until
So the 60s.
late 60s. Yeah.
Yeah.
So, because ICS, Immaculate Conception School, was a
Black
black
Catholic school.
Oh, okay. That was
Uh-huh.
K through 12.
Right.
You had what Sacred Heart on King Street. So did that exist?
No, it existed, but it was white.
Right. That was the white school. So Sacred Heart.
Sacred Heart was the grade school.
Mm-hmm.
Then they had one in over there Nativity.
On what, Farley Road?
Yeah.
Okay. Mm-hmm.
Then they had a Catholic school that's now where the priests live across from the church on St.
St. Philip?
St. Philip.
Okay, across from St. Patrick.
Right.
Yes.
St. Patrick.
Okay. Yeah, there was a school there.
there.
Mm-hmm. St. Patrick's School.
And that was white. And Bishop England was the high school.
Was the high school. Gotcha.
Okay. ICS went from primer to 12th
To 12th
grade.
grade.
So we were all contained in the
In
same
the same
building.
Mm-hmm.
Now, this house on Society Street, 51 Society Street, was the convent
Yes.
for the nuns,
Okay.
Oblate Sisters of Providence.
Mm-hmm.
And the church, was on Society Street or Wentworth,
Mm-hmm.
St.
St. Peter's.
Peter's.
Yeah, St. Peter's.
Uh-huh.
And
Yeah.
I think that's where Granddaddy grew up.
Right.
Leon. Mm-hmm.
Right.
Yeah, that's the church that he attended when he was coming out. So, now how did you meet my grandfather? I know that's Uncle Frank's
To Frank.
stepdad. Yeah.
Frank had gotten a car accident when we were dating,
Mm-hmm.
and it was a bad car accident. And the guy that was in the car with him, he died.
Oh wow.
And he worked for Frank's mother.
Mm-hmm.
And Frank had me fooled about who his parents were.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. I
And
did hear this.
I went to a classmate of mine. I was trying to find Frank.
Mm-hmm.
And I went to Judah Street. That's where I knew where he lived. 7 Judah Street, but he wasn't there.
Mm-hmm.
And neither was his mom.
Mm-hmm.
I knew about his mom's restaurant, but I didn't go there.
Mm-hmm.
I did go there, and the restaurant was closed. So I did not know about his Aunt Sadie,
Mm-hmm.
who lived on Lawrence Street downtown.
Mm-hmm.
And my classmate, Raleigh, I'll never forget him, Raleigh LaRoche, he said, Frank's daddy is got a bar on Columbus Street called Oasis.
Okay. Mm-hmm.
So I went there
Mm-hmm.
and I asked him if he knew where Frank was. And he said no. And I said, I'm Frank's girlfriend.
Mm-hmm.
Are you his father? But Leon never answered me. He just looked at me. And I left.
Mm-hmm.
So what happened, Myron, to show you Charleston in small time, you gotta watch who you're talking to and what you're doing. My sister died, Sarah.
Mm-hmm.
So we went up on H Street, me and Frank and Jimmy, because Miss Turner, the teacher that lived across the street from us on H Street, told me that some people had broken into Sarah's house. And so we went there to get things out that could be taken and see what was missing.
So all this time you were under the impression that Leon
Was his father.
was his biological father. Okay.
And there was a picture
Mm-hmm.
of his biological father sitting in my sister's living room. So he made the statement, what is my daddy doing here?
So
So
you have
I,
seen this picture all the time.
I went, what is that?
Yeah.
I said, that's Bob White. He said, that's my daddy. I said, well, I thought Leon was living over here now. No, that's my biological daddy. I said, oh, I said, well, he was my sister's boyfriend.
Wow. So, so Frank White Senior,
Yeah,
he went as Bob White,
right.
was dating your older sister because there's an age gap.
He,
Anyway,
he,
let's see,
he
Miss
was
Mary,
dating Sarah.
but Miss Mary
Sarah
and
was,
Bob White had Uncle Frank at a younger age.
right.
So
Sarah,
Bob White and Sarah were kind of at the same age.
right.
Wow.
And because Mary, his mama, had him when she was 14 and married to Bob White. And she stayed married 2 years and then he got a divorce and then he married Naomi. But I knew him being married to Naomi because Naomi, my stepmama, Jess, was my grandmama cousin.
Who Justine's Kitchen was named after.
Right.
Okay. Wow. Look at all the connections.
So we was in the house and look at here, man, let's get this thing straight here. Oh, the hell am I dating?
Right.
You know? Yeah.
Wow. So you thought for a while
I
that was his dad.
And then his mama told me about Evelyn, and Evelyn was a McNeil.
Right.
So I automatically assumed that Leon was his dad. I didn't know that her maiden name was Ross. I thought that her maiden name was White. Why his name was Frank White and Leon's name was McNeil.
And Evelyn, who was Trinity's niece, but they raised together as a McNeil.
Right.
Wow.
It was
so
a mess.
How long were y'all dating before this?
Oh, yeah.
And it's oh my goodness, that is funny. So Granddaddy had already had Oasis back
right.
then. Okay.
And Mary, it was two. Mary had the one on Morris Street, and he had the one on Columbus Street.
Wow. That is funny. So a couple of years after y'all, met and got married, then y'all had Sean.
Right.
Okay. So tell me about Sean.
I had two miscarriages before Sean. I got married in '64. I didn't have Sean until I was 20 in 1966. And I must tell you, Sean was small.
Because he was the only child for over 6 years.
7 years.
7 years. Wow. He was an only child. So yeah, he was small because he had it coming from y'all and his grandparents. Wow. Wow. So now Sean grew up in the Catholic school system.
Right.
And he went to
went to Sacred Heart. Then he left Sacred Heart and he went to Cathedral.
Now when he was at Cathedral with Carmelita, Mommy, and Lily and all.
He was there. Then he changed it again and he went back to Sacred Heart.
Okay.
And graduated out to 8th grade from there. Then he went to Bishop England.
Because Bishop England was already integrated at that point. And they were still downtown. They weren't on Daniels Island.
Right.
Okay.
And then he graduated from Bishop England.
And then went on to the Citadel. Okay. And he got his political science degree.
Right.
Okay. Awesome.
And then he went back to Trident Tech and got a degree in draftsmanship and pipe fitting.
Okay.
And that's what he did for a living.
Okay. Gotcha. Now he was someone who was very into books.
Right.
Yeah.
Very.
As you and Uncle Frank,
very much so. He loved books. Yeah. He was really my smartest child. Uh,
Okay.
yeah,
Okay.
I'm not gonna lie. Then I had Dax in 1972
Okay.
at St. Francis.
Okay.
Charleston was born Medical University.
Okay.
And um, then two, we I was pregnant with Piper
Mhm.
when we bought the house on Wantu
Okay, because y'all moved there
in
75.
1975,
Right.
and
Okay.
that's when Piper was born. And not long after that, then your grandfather and your grandmama came to the house and told me that they were buying the house around the
Around the
corner
corner. Literally
on
walking distance on
Bosses.
bosses.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
And that's how we all ended up
Mm-hmm.
around the corner from
From each
each
other.
other.
Yeah, yeah. So by the time I came along, you were just a walk literally up the street.
Right.
And around the corner.
Mm-hmm.
And come over there and visit y'all.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I remember Granny made me mad one time. This is before, like right before my kindergarten graduation. I said, I'm out of here. I'm going to Aunt Ruthie and Uncle Frank. And I walked up the street and there was a neighbor. They was at maybe 20 something bosses. They had this big dog in the yard.
Yeah.
I was scared walking by that house. 5 years old. Once I made it past, I said, "Thank you, Jesus." And went on over, and Sarah was there. Me and Sarah just played around with each other. Wow, yeah, time flies. A lot of good times, a lot of good memories too. But now, Dax and Piper, they went through the public school system.
No, they went to Sacred Heart at first.
Oh, at first, okay.
They were in Catholic school.
Mm-hmm.
That's in the fifth grade when they went to public school. Piper was in second grade.
Okay.
She went to Little Rock.
Yeah. St. Andrews.
Right.
Oh, I didn't know Piper went there. That's where I went too.
Yeah.
Okay.
Little Rock.
Mm-hmm.
And Dax went to C.A. Williams.
Okay, that's why I went there too. Okay.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
Because he was in the fifth grade going to the sixth grade.
Okay.
So that was the middle school at that time.
Mm-hmm. See, Uncle Lily, Aunt Sonia, and Uncle John went to C.E. Williams as well. Yeah, yeah. Now, they both went to Middleton High?
No, Piper went to Middleton.
Piper went to Middleton.
He went to the one on Walpole.
St.
Andrews High. Yeah.
Oh, that is St. Andrews High. Okay.
St. Andrews High. He graduated from there.
Okay.
Then they switched. They had two. I think they had two schools, or they changed them from St. Andrews to Middleton because there's a point where she went to Drayton Hall.
Okay.
From Little Rock to Drayton Hall, and then from Drayton Hall to Middleton.
Okay. Gotcha.
But that's the C to St. Andrews.
Okay.
But the reason they went to public school is because, like I said, I had a period of time when I was sick and I couldn't work, and finances were where I could afford to send them, but they had to get educated, and I wasn't going to have children without an education. That was our goal. Well, we were always taught at Blacks that in order to compete with these Caucasians, we had to have some sort of background, that we were no less than them. We could prove that we were better than them.
Yeah.
And that was our way of thinking. I'm afraid that's not the way children think today.
Yeah, it is a little bit different.
It's a little bit different.
Absolutely. Wow. So
the children today don't have any fear. You understand?
They don't.
They don't.
These Gen Zs don't.
They don't. Therefore, they don't realize the situation that man has put us in. They don't grasp it. And I'm afraid they are not the type to turn the other cheek.
Not at all. Now I kind of fall in that category too now. More so subscribe to Malcolm X than Dr. King.
Yeah, and see, this is the problem. This is the problem. I'm afraid if they don't get the situation under control and
Mhm.
get rid of that man, this is going to be the wild, wild west. Everybody took the guy,
Yeah. Uh-huh.
because I'm to the point where I think I need a gun too.
Are you gonna go get it again? We gonna leave it at that.
Okay.
Yeah, yeah. Well, I understand. I definitely understand. But yeah, Ruthie, we gonna conclude part one right here because this
Okay.
has been great. You know, a lot of these stories I already know, but like I said, this is important because not only me, one day passing this on to my children, but same thing for my siblings,
Right,
and then same thing for your grandchildren,
right,
Sarah, Noah, Caleb, and Katie.
okay,
So
right,
that they could use this as a keepsake.
right,
Okay, for
okay.
decades and
So that
decades and
is,
decades to come.
yeah,
That's the beauty of technology.
right,
You couldn't do this with your
before,
grandmother. You know what
right.
I mean? And she passed away. How long ago did she pass?
She died in 1963,
63. So of course,
December 13th, 1963.
oh, she passed right after Granny's grandmother did.
Yeah.
Yeah. Wow. So of course, technology is different. So
Hmm.
there's probably will come a point where we're gonna try to have to figure out how to convert this over to something that they can just put in their brains and make these
Right.
chips and stuff. But yes, thank you so much, Ruthie, for
You're
doing this
quite
with me today.
welcome.
I love you so much.
I love
But
you
yeah,
too.
thank you so much for this. Peace
Okay.
and blessings.
All right.
All right.